that, John, I don't know if you saw this. I think I mentioned it yesterday. It was about the Three-Fifths Compromise. Had you seen that?
You mentioned it, but I don't know what you're referring to.
Perfect. Okay. So this is a clip featuring, what's his name? Indiana Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith. And in this video, he makes a defensive posture about the Three-Fifths Compromise. All right, let's see.
Hey, everybody, this is Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith. Want to give you an update on a bill, Senate Bill 289, which is called Unlawful Discrimination Bill. Senator Byrne is carrying that bill. It was in the Senate just a few minutes ago. Well, if you were watching or listening to the Senate, if you were trying to fall asleep and we're trying to get some good background noise on, you might have been listening. The Senate on the Democrat side, they got up and they started talking about how this bill embodies something to the effect of the Three-Fifths Compromise. They were bringing that up. They were saying this is a bad bill because it actually encourages discrimination, just like the Three-Fifths Compromise, going all the way back to the foundations of our nation. I would like to share with you the Three-Fifths Compromise is not a pro-discrimination compromise. It was not a pro-discrimination or a slave-driving compromise that the founders made. It was actually just the opposite. It was a compromise that the North made with the South. At the time, there were basically 13 independent nations. They had not really created a constitution. They were sort of a European Union-esque nation. And they were saying to the pro-slave states, hey, if you want to count your slaves to have representation, more representation in Congress, we're not going to let you do that. Because they knew that that would codify things like slavery into our nation. And the North stood up to the South. And they said, we're going to, if you're going to count your property, because the South says, hey, this is our property, but we want to count them in the congressional representation. We want to count them in the census. At the time, there was 30,000 people would equal one member of Congress. And so they said, we're going to count our slaves. We're going to get more members of Congress in the South. The North said, you can't do that. So what they came back to the South and they said, fine, if you want to count your property, your slaves as whole people, we're going to count our property. We're going to count our tables. We're going to count our chairs. We're going to count all the stuff that we have in our house. And the South said, well, you can't do that. And they said, well, you're doing it with your property. We're doing it with our property. So what they did is they came up with a Three-Fifths Compromise. They said, you will only get 3/5 of a vote when it comes to your slave. And what that did, it actually limited the number of pro-slave representatives in Congress by 40%. This was a great move by the North to make sure that slavery would be eradicated in our nation. They knew what they were doing. But now here you have Senate Democrats in today's American Republic who do not understand that. They think the Three-Fifths Compromise was something that was a scourge on Black people. That's not what it was.
All right, so there's more to this, but I want to get you guys' opinion on this right out the bat here. We'll start. EK, what do you think when you first heard this?
I mean, that's definitely not what I was talking about. I think he took a bit of some liberties with that. I mean, I don't even know what to begin. Dude.
Yeah, it's his framing is wild. Oh, sorry, John. What were your thoughts on it?
I was concerned that you didn't cut to me first there, TJ.
You know what? No, this is no time for joking, John. This is a serious issue. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in all seriousness, the first knee-jerk thought I had was, dude, why are you sitting on your desk like that? There's a chair right there behind you. You could make a nice official statement from your desk, and you are awkwardly sitting on this desk, swinging your leg, like you know that this is a weird thing for you to be saying. Like at some place in his brain, he was clearly nervous about making this video, and I'm just like, why even make it? Like, do you really think that you're gonna convince people here that the Three-Fifths Compromise is actually pro-Black people? And like, I guess I sort of understand the point he was making, but like, you just don't, there's no reason to make that point in the year 2025. If you're sitting there trying to defend Northern legislators back in 17 whatever, and you're like, hey, they're a bunch of liberals, you're going to compromise with the slave owners. Maybe, but like, why the hell would you ever say that in public without prompt? Like, he went out and made that video on his own.
Yes, in his own office. No one forced him to do this. Yes. Also, the framing of it is what's wildly off here, in that he could say that, you know, the 3/5 compromise gave slave states representation they did not deserve. It gave them representation. I do, by the way, like that the northern states came back and says, okay, well, if you're going to count your property, we're going to count our tables and chairs. That was genius. That was actually really funny. Actually, I actually like that a lot. But instead of saying it gave the southern states who were bitching and complaining about the fact that they couldn't count their human property as for legislative power, instead of saying that, he says, well, actually, this was a good thing because it took away lots of representation from the South. No, it didn't. It didn't take any away. It gave them free representation that was unearned. And so, John, you were mentioning how awkward it is and how in the back of his mind, he has to know that this is not a good look here. It gets worse. It gets worse. And I can't wait to show you the end of this video here. Here we go.
And how did we get to this place? We got to this place because of DEI in education. We got to this place because you have professors at woke schools that will not teach the history of what actually happened back in the foundations of our nation. Many, many men and leaders in our nation's history knew how wicked slavery was. They knew that God had created even black people, white people, red people, all people in his image, and they were fighting for equality for all. But they're not taught that today. And that's why you had the Senate Democrats who were getting up talking about the 3/5 compromise like it was some sort of terrible thing in our past. It was not. It actually was the exact opposite that helped to root out slavery and lead us into a more perfect union that we now see where black, white, red, brown, all people can have equal representation under the law. That's what the 3/5 compromise was all about. So don't buy into the DEI radical revisionist history that is happening in today's culture. Know your history. Go back and study the documents. Read them for yourself like I have. Go look them up, and you will find that the 3/5 compromise and many other things like that were designed to make sure that justice was equal for all people, and equality really meant equality for all. So that's what's going on in the Senate today. Glad to keep you updated. Thanks for everyone tuning in and for all you're doing to keep our nation and our state the greatest it can possibly be.
All right, before I get you guys' reaction on this, I showed this to a friend of mine this past weekend, and he asked a great question. He said, I wonder what the books are in his bookcase back there. I wonder what books he possibly has. And so I zoomed it in to check. You can't read the spines. The only book you can read is this blue one right here. It's the only book that's facing out if you zoom in. It is the Holy Bible. It is the Holy Bible. It's the only book that you can actually see right there. But all right, we'll go to you first on this one, John. What do you think of his follow-up there, which is even better than the first part, if you ask me?
You know, 3/5 is equal to 1 is a wonderful argument to be making if you're trying to argue for more accurate factual education here. Wow. The way people talk about, and by people, I mostly mean Republicans here, the way they talk about slavery as if, or like that period in our nation's time, as if it is something that we were so heroic for overcoming. We just had this evil of slavery, and you know what? We were so damn good for overcoming it. It's like, and then they have the gall to say, oh, if you just read a book, you would learn that none of this is true. It's like, I have to respect the game knowing that no one in his audience is actually going to read the book, and they're just going to assume that, yeah, he must be correct because he read books. They're right behind him on the bookcase. Look, he must be a smart guy. But, oh, my God, there have been so many examples of just blatant, hey, this is the truth. It's an utter lie, but I'm just going to say it's the truth. It's easily disprovable, like 3/5 equals 1. That those two things are equality. But, like, it just makes me sad, TJ. It makes me sad that like we even have to sit here and talk about this right now, and that guy isn't immediately eliminated from a position of power for making this video.
True. EK, what do you think?
NDEI for mediocre white dudes, man. Like, bro couldn't come up with anything more convincing. It's like, yeah, like that sounds like, you know, some shit where it's like you and the boys come over and you just smoke one out, and you're like, you know what? Yeah, dog. There was like 3/5 of them, right? And like I was actually that helped black people.
It is.
1790. Great time for black people in America.
And it's just like nobody in the room just like saying enough to check him. Was like, hey, dog, hey, I think you smoke too much or something. Like that's just like, dude, come on, man. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Like, how do we get
Yeah.
like this in a position of power? And it's just like, okay, it's like, all right, that dude clearly deserves way more like power to affect change
Yep.
in the government than me.
Yep. I cackled. I cackled with laughter after he gave 2.5 minutes of that speech and said, you know why people don't know about the Three-Fifths Compromise? It's because of DEI and woke schools. That's why they don't know, because God knows the last thing that DEI initiatives and stuff talk about is the slavery and the Three-Fifths Compromise. They never bring that up. And so I thought that was really funny. Also, I don't know if you guys caught this. I'm sure you did, actually. EK, I saw you react to that specifically. Is when he starts rattling off that, this is what helped to bring equality to all people, white, black, red, brown. Yes. And I was like, okay, the first time he did it, I said, well, maybe that was like a slip up or something. Oh, yeah, I shouldn't say it anymore. He went back. He said red twice. Not an accident. So you caught that too, John?
The red, it like hit like a drum. And you're like, oh, I actually thought he was confident. He did it again. I said, oh my God, this guy just calls Native Americans red people. Like that he just does that in his day-to-day life. It's not like he was even referring to like a quote, like how they talked about him at the time. No, he was saying red people. That it's one of the most like, even racists don't say that anymore. Like you have to have some deep-rooted racism to call people red. Like that's like it went out of fashion with the racists. Like that's just like that is deep-rooted hate right there. To the point, and he doesn't even recognize. Again, this is put out on his own. It's not like he was in an interview. He was caught off guard. He put this out there on his own. Was like, that looked like it. That was a good video to put out there. I'm sure the people will love this one.
Yeah. EK, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's like, so I remember 30 years ago, probably longer than that, where people did regularly say, so like it,
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's like, dude, we don't say that no more, man. It's just like the revolution has happened. Like it's done now. Why are you hanging on to some old shit? It's like, yo, why you got a Nokia? Like we out here. Is that a Moto Razor? Like, oh, they still make that? Wow.
That
like,
it's so true. That's interesting because if he would have said this 30 years ago, it wouldn't have been as jarring. Like it wouldn't have. And it's funny to me watching how language changes with this over the years and how my language has changed over the years. And that, calling people yellow was something that I did as a kid. Like that's how people talk. That doesn't happen anymore. One of them that's been interesting to watch over the years. I don't know if you guys have caught this, but EK may have caught it because it was a little longer ago. But when I remember back in the day, 25, 30 years ago, that people would say something that when you say it now, people get offended by it. And that's with referring to black people as blacks. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. EK, so all right, I'm okay. So yeah. I feel like I'm crazy here because when I grew up, in fact, you will still see this. You'll still see this from, like respected news organizations with like anchors, whatever. They'll say, 30% of blacks say this. That's just how people talked back in the day. That wasn't. Now, what happened was the same thing that happened to word like Jews. I never say like Jews. I never say that. I say Jewish people. I never say it because the racists get a hold of it and they just put a little too much English on the word there. And so the term blacks has come to be a derogatory term when it was not 30 years ago. You remember that too, EK?
Yeah, like so, like it goes both ways though. Like I remember it being like more derogatory because it was always a certain type of people that would talk about the blacks.
Right.
But then like there's also like that there's that Tiger Woods video from when he was a kid on Oprah and he was talking about, oh yeah, the blacks will love me. And I'm like, bro, I don't
I don't remember that.
Well, I was like
yeah. There's a difference between blacks and the blacks. The blacks has always been in that category, always. And I was like, I think that the people, the racists would always use it, and the term became offensive, kind of like the word Negro. Like the word Negro was just how you refer to black people back then. And it's just funny watching how those Kobe TJ Carbon dating himself. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah. God, that would have been a great one to go to John on. 2 in a row. I whiffed. That would have been a really good one to go to John on. I wish I'd have done that now. John's not saying a word.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to revoke myself from this one, TJ.
Fine.
But I kind of agree. It's just like conceptual. Like we still say whites, but we don't say
Well,
blacks. You know,
I don't.
and it's like it's just because the racist people were saying it. Like I don't think there's anything like historically derogatory about it. Correct me if I'm wrong here. It's just because the most racist people started saying the blacks when they can no longer say the N-word.
Yes, yeah, that is what happened. At least in my opinion, from what I've seen over the years, that the people who used it and said it with a lot of force, it kind of made you rethink it and everything. And the term has kind of fallen out of fashion. But yeah, because people they say this a lot that, well, we don't say blacks because it dehumanizes black people by not calling them people. No, that's no. I don't buy that. People say Asians, they say Hispanics, they do, and that's not dehumanizing language. We say it because the racists. Well, we don't say it because the racists say it. That at least that's how I see it anyway. But yeah, just wanted to I thought that was a good banter thing right there. And what EK said, I wrote it down, is that he's not mad. He's just disappointed. And I feel that way a lot with what's going on now in politics, that even best case scenario, if people rise up and they rebel against Trump and just everyone rejects everything about him, it's still kind of a hollow victory in my mind, because this system that we prided ourselves upon led us here to where half of the voting population said, yeah, I think this is a good idea. Let's go for it. Let's roll the dice on Trump again. I don't know, how am I supposed to trust these people for the next 30 or 40 years of my life? How am I supposed to do that? Like, why would I ever have confidence in their judgment again? I don't know. Do you feel that way, AK? Because I think about that every day.
Yeah. So for me, it's like, so it's like hot take. There will never be a socialist revolution without getting like liberals and conservatives on board. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to convince the proletariat like to go against whatever the structure is that is keeping everybody down. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if we were to do like a big general strike in 2028, like the UAW wants to, and like a bunch of other organizations wants to, like that has to be like a class struggle. In which case you're going to also have to go to some of the people who wanted Donald Trump to be president and get their buy-in to like actually go against like the corporate powers that are, essentially stealing their lunch from them and putting them in miserable conditions, and demand work or demand like proper pay and an actual like life that's worth living, from the powers that be. So it's like, I get what you're saying, where it's like, I don't know if I can trust you. I don't think I can ever forgive you. And I think especially I see it way more on the left, is that we're really like unforgiving of people, like, and just but it's like, you're not going to affect the change that you want to make without like getting the buy-in from like a lot of the people who voted for the other side and getting their trust, and hoping that they will actually hold up their end of the bargain. But like you gotta unfortunately build a bridge with some of these people who you probably don't like a lot right now.
And it's funny, EK, that kind of works both ways too. Because how often do you hear from liberal Democrats like, oh, these leftists, these progressives, these, however they'd refer to us, they just hate the Democratic Party, and they want to bring us down. And it's like, but don't you see value in a pipeline for people who hate the Democratic Party to still disproportionately vote for the Democratic Party while hating them? Don't you find there's some value to onboard people from other walks of life into a faction of the party that hates the establishment but will still vote for them more often than not? There's value to these bridges being built, even if we are in disagreement with each other. And it seems like really no one wants to actually build or maintain them. but they have to be, as you're saying. Like the other side here is way too consolidated, and we don't quite have the demographics to just defeat them without making friends with some people who we would otherwise disagree with.
I'm not fighting no gorilla.
All right. Well, thank you very much for making it to the end of this episode of The Left Wing with returning guest EK Powell. He hasn't been here for a while. You might not even recognize him. So, EK, if people want to know where to find you, where can they do it?
It's going to be at What's Good English. That is on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. Been burned out for a while, so no new videos, but my old stuff is still pretty good. And eventually I'll make some new stuff.
We appreciate it, EK. Thank you for joining us. Folks, we want to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by Scott's Burgers in Bixby, Oklahoma, the restaurant we wish Luigi Mangione would have eaten at instead of McDonald's, because, as Scott has told us before, there are no rats in this kitchen. Catch you guys later. All right, good stuff. Good